The topic we will be talking about is the exchange rate between the US dollar and the euro. Before we dive into it, though, we would like to give you all a summary of exchange rates and why they are important. Firstly, there are two types of exchange rates, fixed and floating. A fixed exchange rate is one where the value of a currency is, fixed or pegged to the value of another currency, whereas a floating exchange rate allows the value of the currency to be determined by the demand and supply of the currency on the foreign exchange market. This type of exchange rate regime is the one that takes place between the US dollar and the euro. Exchange rates are important because they affect the economy of countries. Although people might think that having a high exchange rate, in other words, having a stronger currency, is the better option, this is not necessarily the case. High exchange rates do have certain advantages, such as putting a downward pressure on inflation as imports become cheaper for consumers and thus urging producers to be more competitive by keeping prices low. However, this increased competition can result hurtful to domestic industries by causing a fall in the demand for domestic products and services. This fall could lead to a further increase in the level of unemployment as firms cut back. Contrary to high exchange rates, low exchange rates actually benefit employment in export industries as exports from the country become relatively less expensive. It also encourages domestic consumers to buy domestically produced goods instead of relatively more expensive imports, thus also helping raise employment. However, as imports become more expensive, costs of production rise, which means there's a serious likelihood of inflation.
Here we have a graph which was published by the European Central Bank that represents the euro to US dollar exchange rate between the years 2010 and 2019. It begins at 2010 with an exchange rate of 1.3, which after a small decline starts growing dramatically until it reaches 1.4 in May 2014. Then it abruptly drops to 1.05 in March 2015. The reason behind this fall is a crisis that happened in Ukraine because of the split opinions between joining the European Union or merging with Russia. After that, it fluctuates between 1.05 and 1.1, reaching a low point in January 2017 with a value of 1.03, caused by the United Kingdom exiting the European Union, which had tremendous consequences in Europe's economy. Then it experiences a sharp rise between December 2016 and February 2018, where it reaches 1.25. Lastly, there's a moderate decrease in the exchange rate where it falls to 1.1 again in December 2019. From this graph, we can learn that the euro has always had more value than the US dollar since 2010, and whenever there is a crisis or a war in Europe, such as the crisis in Ukraine or the terrorist attacks in Paris, their values get closer.
In conclusion, because the exchange rate between the US dollar and the euro is floating, it is determined by the demand and supply of each currency on the foreign exchange market, which can be affected by events going on in the world. What we have provided are possible explanations for why the currency might have appreciated or depreciated according to the graph. It is important to remember that correlation is not causation. Nevertheless, governments can intervene in the foreign exchange market to influence the value of their currency due to several reasons. Because exchange rates have such a strong impact on the export and import industry, and these are two important components in the aggregate demand of a country, it seems reasonable that governments should intervene.